The Alexander Cell Saga, Chapter 2, the Iranian Fiasco. If you have a look at this map, you will see that Iran is a very, very large country and that there are a lot of pipelines on it, and I worked on a lot of them. A couple of months before Christmas, Alan Carter asked me if I would like to go to Iran as a cathodic protection engineer. I said okay, but that I did not feel like an engineer, and he said not to worry, the company was desperate. Nobody else wanted to go, and I said I would go if I could go home for Christmas. They reluctantly said yes, and there I was on a plane for Tehran. I was met at the airport by an Armenian refugee who was an employee of the Anglo-Iranian company who I had been rented to. Unfortunately, my luggage went on for a world tour with Pakistan International Airways. I waited in Tehran for a couple of days, but my company put pressure on the airline to pay compensation so that I could buy new clothes, etc., and get on with my work. I got my money and had just spent it when the airline said they wanted it back as they had found my luggage. I went to identify my luggage, which now bore labels from all over the world, including Australia, all saying passenger not known in a variety of languages. I told them that I'd spent the money and they had given me on new gear and that they could keep the luggage. They said that they didn't want the baggage, they weren't going to make a fuss about the money. Would I just not tell the world that they had screwed up in the first place? They haven't paid me any silence money for the past 20 years, so I now feel I can free to tell about it. During these first few days in Tehran, I had been introduced to the expatriate local manager, Derek Oakley, and the Iranian managing director, Mr. Garibani, and his wife, who was also a director. They said that I would be in the care of an Armenian engineer called Harry, and arranged that I would travel to the furthest point north in Iran, which was on the border with Russia. At the time I thought it was Russia, but it was in fact the Soviet Union and is now Azerbaijan. It was a place on the Caspian Sea, but on the way there we were told to call in a place called Rasht to try to sell air company service to the local water company who had a problem with corrosion of the reinforcing steel in their concrete water pipes. I said that I didn't know the first thing about this, and they said, never mind, play it by ear and see if you can get us a job out of it. We bundled our gear into a Land Rover and Harry drove like a madman through the beautiful scenery from Tehran to Rasht, which is on the southern shores of the Caspian Sea. He said we could make a profit on our expenses if I would allow him to book us in at a hotel of his choice. So I agreed. I had no option anyway, as I hadn't got a clue where to stay. Rasht. He took us to this really downtown guest house in a back street and negotiated a price with the owner. If I'd have had my way, he would have paid us to sleep there. But never mind, there was a bed and we survived the journey, so we might just survive the night. It was not to be that simple, as Harry liked to go to the cinema. By the look of Rash, so did everyone else. The streets were packed with cinemas and there were queues at all of them. So we went to the one with the shortest queue. Having suffered one Indian film, we went to another, and then to another. Harry really liked cinema. I had to go with Harry as I could never have found my way back to the hovel where we were to spend the night. One of my most vivid memories of Rasht was asking Harry the nature of a splendid building which was lit up with coloured lights, lanterns. It had buntings and floodlights, and I thought it must be a casino or a dance hall. But Harry said it was the local police station. I imagined the cells full of clowns and wild animals, with the police band playing circus music to the delight of the prosecutor, who would, of course, be dressed like a ringmaster. The next day we tried to find the water company, but it would appear that nobody was interested, and it didn't take me long to persuade Harry to drive us the rest of the journey to Astura on the Russian border. He introduced me to the local sheikh, who was also the local contractor who supplied the labour to our company when required. Harry suggested that he arrange my accommodation, but I asked if I could do this on this occasion. He reluctantly agreed to book me into the government-authorised hotel, which was on the shores of the Caspian Sea, which has clean black sand at this point and is excellent for swimming. Harry told me that he had helped to install the cathodic protection ground bed at this point of the pipeline, which carries natural gas from Iran to Russia. The pipeline was giving cause for concern, as it had been discovered that it had been coated with coal tar enamel, old bitumen, and when they ran out of these, the contractors had melted down old vehicle tiles and anything else they could lay their hands on to make the pipeline steel look black. Presumably, the coat and wrap inspectors had been suitably disinterested during this activity on account of the availability of enormous quantities of local vodka, which the indigent forgot to dilute. 2 or 3 shots of this took the enamel off your teeth and caused your shirt to run up your back like a roller blind. I had still not seen a ground bed at this stage in my career, and I had been sent as a consultant engineer to diagnose the cathodic protection problem. However, I had been told to take some resistivity readings, and when I said that I had no idea to do this, Derek Oakley had said, "Never mind, Harry will show you. Just look as if you're an engineer." We'd been given a mega ground resistance meter, the like of which I'd never seen in my life. When we got to the site, the suspect ground bed, Harry got out this and I assisted him to drive in some steel pins at various distances. We wound the handle on the side of the meter and adjusted the 3 dials so that the galvanometer needle stayed on 0. The theory is like this picture. We then noted the setting of the dials and repeated the process with 4 steel pins at different spacings. It all went very well, and the locals were very impressed, I even felt like an engineer for a while. I made lots of notes and worked out what we had achieved. Apparently, a man called Venner had worked out that if you send an alternating current between two steel pins, the resistance of the earth causes a voltage drop across the space between them. If you have two other pins in line with the outer two, you can measure the voltage in relation to the current using the null balance meter. From the voltage and current output, you can calculate the resistance. And Venner showed that this would be the result of the current passing through the hemisphere of Earth proportional to the distances of the pins. The further you separate the pins, the deeper the average Earth resistance shows on the meter. A strange thing about Earth resistance is that they are expressed in units known as ohms meters. They're not linear, and it is a qualitative meeting. Isn't that strange? Anyway, we found an ideal location to construct the new ground bed, and Harry left me with the materials to construct it. I did not realise he was going to disappear on business, but before he went, he introduced me to the foreman of the crew he had used to construct the first ground bed, which had incidentally failed. I sat in the government hotel on my own in the middle of God knows where, trying to make sense of the very first engineering drawings of a cathodic protection ground bed that I had ever seen in my life. The next day I had to go out with a crew who spoke no English and supervise the construction of the very first ground bed that I would ever see. The sheikh turned up and asked if I would like to eat with them. He spoke the local language with lots of signs, smiles and pleasant friendly noises. I replied with nods and pleased noises, hoping that I would not get into any sort of problem. He took me to the beach where we ate sturgeon kebabs washed down with raw alcohol, which they called the local vodka. Of course, I didn't know that they called it vodka, as I couldn't understand a word that they were saying, but somebody later told me that they would have called it vodka. I got mellow and lost my concerns about the job scheduled for the next day. Early the next morning, the foreman picked me up at the local hotel, took me to the site where I worked out the position of the ground bed from the drawing. From there on, they all started digging. After all, they'd done this before. Wasn't I lucky? After all, I'd helped fit a ring main and anodes together in Selby, and I'd found the position of the power supply and the transformer rectifier, so it was fairly easy to look like an engineer. There was no question of having to convince the workers or the foreman. They already believed that I knew what I was doing, and I felt a glow of confidence until another expatriate arrived and announced that he was the engineer representing the client. Whoops! I waited. We walked around and he passed no comment. Neither did I. We looked at the drawings together and he saw that they matched what we were doing. Then he admitted he did not know anything about cathodic protection, had been asked to call in to see what was going on. I said not to worry, leave everything to me, no problems, and the job will be completed to specifications. He believed me, and to my surprise, so did I. I kept asking him about his career until he left. It was a damn sight safer than allowing him to ask me about my career until he left. We did complete the job, and I did switch it on, and I did make notes of all the readings, and I did adjust the transformer rectifier, and I got some readings that matched those recommended in the book. I had completed my first project when Harry turned up again. Harry told me that I was to return to Tehran urgently, but unfortunately he had to stay to complete the project. I told him that I'd finished it, and he said that he couldn't come anyway as he had some other business to transact. If he gave me a rather lot of money, would I go back to Tehran on my own? I felt confident that the locals were friendly, that it would be interested to take local transport on such a journey. He advised me to take a taxi. I took a taxi, and it was exciting. It was much faster than Harry, and much more hair-raising. But I reasoned that this man did this for a job, for a living, and he would not survive long enough to even be a taxi driver if he was not competent on the roads. This theory was somewhat dented by the many coaches which I saw smashed to pieces at the bottom of ravines during this journey. My confidence in my taxi driver's ability was enhanced when we arrived at Tehran. I had been told to check in at the Imperial Hotel. There were 2 engineers from the company who were regular residents. There was a traffic hold-up which my taxi driver beat at a set of traffic lights by mounting the pedestrian pavement, crossing diagonally to the opposite pavement, which he drove along for about half a kilometre to enter the Imperial Hotel via the exit gate. He didn't even pay the boy who cleaned the windscreen whilst we were jumping the red lights. I gave him a tip.